Say to the people who say, Sophie Cunningham, she shoots those three-pointers, makes them look like free throws.
I'm like, good. That's what I get paid to do. I should.
You do get paid.
Barely, but we're still...
That energy, that voice, that total reluctance to provide you with a polished, pre-approved response. The unwritten rules of the league are not followed by Sophie Cunningham. She has never done so. And for that exact reason, her recent remarks regarding Stephanie White, the Indiana Fever, and the circumstances surrounding Caitlin Clark are currently making the rounds in sports media. People stop and pay attention when a player who has nothing to lose and no institutional loyalties to defend chooses to be open about what is truly happening in this league. The Indiana Fever front office is just not ready to publicly address the picture that Cunningham's remarks, along with Clark's own body language and performance metrics from inside that Fever locker room, paint. The word that the most ardent Fever supporters are currently aiming for is not disappointment. Nor is it frustration. It's a betrayal. Because of what has been happening within the Indiana Fever organization, the rotation changes that disrupt Clark's rhythm just as she's gaining momentum, the post-game remarks that give credit to everyone but the player who just had a historic fourth quarter, and the increasing perception that this coaching staff is actually working against its own biggest star. None of it feels like simple incompetence anymore. It seems deliberate. According to reports, Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark are no longer pretending otherwise.
Stephanie White defenders are starting to turn on her. Stephanie White's biggest advocates are starting to turn on her.
The growing sentiment of, hey, Stephanie White is not the right coach for this team.
Defenders are switching allegiances. The folks who supported this hire, this coaching methodology, and this staff for months are beginning to change. The actual political dynamics inside a sports organization also change when that group does. The question is whether the front office of the Indiana Fever is keeping an eye on that change as it occurs, or whether they intend to wait until the boycott figures make it hard to ignore it. You must return to the Washington Mystics game in order to fully comprehend why the Clark, Cunningham, and White situation has reached its current breaking point. This is because the events that followed the game marked the turning point from general dissatisfaction into a true organizational crisis. One of the most thrilling individual fourth-quarter performances in WNBA history was given by Clark. 17 points in 9 minutes, 5 three-pointers from the logo range. The entire crowd thought the comeback was genuinely possible because of her team's unwavering determination to pull them back from a disadvantage. The audience sprang to life. Washington appeared shaken. Suddenly, everything felt dangerous.
Caitlin Clark just put on one of the greatest fourth-quarter performances in WNBA history to carry her team to overtime. She was 5 of 7.
17 points in 9 minutes, 5 of 7 from 3. One of the best individual performances this league has ever seen in the fourth quarter. After the game, Stephanie White was immediately questioned by a reporter regarding Caitlin Clark's performance. The moment that followed ignited the internet, and it hasn't stopped burning ever since.
Threes in that fourth quarter, more than our first two games combined, so just your thoughts on the resilience from her.
I thought our whole group...
The group as a whole shown resiliency. That was the reaction following a historic solo performance. In 9 minutes, 5 threes. The instructor talks about the entire group, but she refuses to mention the names. Seconds later, the same reporter poses essentially the same query, except this time it concerns Kelsey Mitchell.
It's speechless, really. She was 0 for 7 in the first half and 4 points, and just put.
For a player who went 0 for 7 in the first half, I'm speechless. However, the player who hit 5 for 7 from 3 in the fourth quarter of that same game was not dumbfounded or even particularly complimentary. Within 60 seconds of one other, the same head coach gave 2 entirely different emotional reactions during the same game and news conference. Additionally, the fans that saw the news conference in real time did not miss it. Even before White left the platform, the video footage was making the rounds on social media. This is the point at which the discussion around Stephanie White escalates beyond a single press conference following a game. Since the reaction following the game is a sign, the real illness is the pattern of in-game choices. And that trend, which has been observed in numerous games and is apparent to anyone who is paying close attention, is what has caused irate supporters to use terms like coordinated and purposeful.
Back-to-back threes. Stephanie White hates seeing that. She says
Clark makes consecutive three-pointers. Momentum increases. The audience becomes boisterous. Then, just when Clark's shooting rhythm is at its best, the substitution, timeout, and rotation take the ball away from her. Is this deliberate now? Is Stephanie White deliberately impeding Clark's progress to prevent her from assuming full control? Or is this typical coaching managing the rotation, controlling the minutes, and allowing the defense to rest? The truth is that you can't find out from a single game. James can't tell you, but the standard coaching explanation starts to crumble under the weight of the evidence. Not a single field goal for 4 minutes. When fans start recording this pattern over the course of a season and start timing every substitution that occurs right after a Clark scoring run, this team completely ceased scoring as soon as Clark left the court. Furthermore, that is not a social media story nor a fan theory. Any fair coaching evaluation must explicitly address that reported performance discrepancy. This is the reason why supporters find the post-game response to this pattern so frustrating. Stephanie White's post-game framing ignored the Washington game, the 4-minute scoring drought, and Clark's emotional need to save the team from a collapse she didn't cause. She discussed the team. She discussed the group. Mitchell went 0 for 7 in the first half, and she left him stunned. Fans who have been paying close attention are not the only ones who have observed the disconnect. Sophie Cunningham comes in, because the story of Stephanie White is not a standalone entity. It has a direct connection to a past that Cunningham has been ready to discuss in public in a manner that very few other current WNBA players have been able to equal. Cunningham's voice is not incidental. She is a recognized veteran, a starter for the Phoenix Mercury, and a player whose reputation has been established solely on her refusal to give the league the tidy, easy answers it wants. Additionally, her remarks regarding Caitlin Clark's surroundings, particularly with regard to Stephanie White and the established guard's response to Clark's arrival, completely alter the way the fans are currently viewing the Indiana Fever, going out of their way to make a cruel example out of the new girl. Additionally, Cunningham's description most closely relates to the coaching staff. Stephanie White's Connecticut Sunday was the one that perfectly captured the old guard's response to Clark's arrival. In order to understand why the present Indiana Fever scenario is so explosive, let's go back to what White's club did to Clark during that playoff series. Fans weren't just against the coaching hire. It is the selection of the particular individual whose defensive approach against Clark was characterized as methodical, unrelenting, and occasionally hazardous. The person who stood with her arms crossed on the sidelines as her teammates carried out what Cunningham essentially verified was an organized operation, a coordinated hit job masquerading as a defensive tactic rather than merely aggressive defense. And every day at practice film sessions, timeout huddles, and post-game press conferences where the same coach is unable to find a single specific word of praise following a historic performance, the player on the receiving end of that strategy is now expected to follow instructions from the person who created it. According to reports, Caitlin Clark is currently living that reality. She is no longer living in silence, as seen by the growing social media backlash since the Washington game, which now includes calls for a boycott, threats of a walkout, and open demands from supporters for a public statement from the front office. Let's discuss the boycott. Due to the word's widespread usage on the internet, it is simple to dismiss it as hyperbole. Social media has a lengthy history of advocating boycotts that never take place. Particularly, sports supporters are notorious for threatening economic action but still coming up because their passion for the game usually outweighs their dissatisfaction with the organization. The figures are starting to reflect how different this situation feels.
100 MPC frustration with their wallets.
White does not know how to capitalize.
One player has caused a building that has been selling out to have 1,600 unfilled seats. The same player whose record accomplishments are routinely deflected in press conferences, whose momentum is consistently cut short, and whose name the person coaching her seems unable to speak with true admiration. It's not an abstraction. Those vacant chairs. They stand in for supporters who bought tickets, but deliberately decided not to utilize them. Fans that express their dissatisfaction with the direction this franchise is taking by making a genuine, documented, financial decision. And if the front office doesn't react, that figure will increase. Because the fans who are currently staying at home are not on the margin. They are the casual, recently converted crowd that Clark initially brought to this league. When the product no longer feels worth their time and money, the audience that hasn't been devoted to the WNBA for 25 years will get disengaged.
For boycotts right now.
The fans won't be there anytime soon unless you fire Stephanie White.
No matter where Clark goes next, her fans will follow her, not the organization or the Fever. And every official in the Indiana Fever front office should currently have that message on their desk. Because the coaching philosophy, rotation choices, and post-game presentation that they are disputing do not pertain to the franchise. The arrival of one player changed the league's entire financial trajectory. And the supporters who spearheaded that change are keeping an eye on every rotation, post-game remark, and substitution, and adjusting their choices appropriately. The Clark, Cunningham, and White dilemma did not arise out of thin air, so let's take a step back and examine the front office decision that led to this whole predicament. The moment Stephanie White was named head coach of the Indiana Fever, it was planted. In contrast to the defensive-first, grinded-out mentality that had characterized White's Connecticut Sun tenure, fans had been calling for a visionary, offensive mind who understood that unleashing Caitlin Clark's full potential required a system built around pace, spacing, deep shooting, and freedom. Rather, they acquired the mastermind behind the playoff disaster. It was referred to as competitive basketball by the coach who watched from the sidelines as her players repeatedly targeted Clark. Cunningham effectively verified that the coach's public remarks were motivated more by institutional animosity than by true basketball philosophy. Use a chainsaw to cut it. And now that the coaching connection has been in place for several months, the irony has solidified into something quite different, since the theoretical question of whether this collaboration could succeed has turned into a documented, game-by-game reality. Additionally, the rotation patterns, post-game communication, and in-game momentum management that the games are displaying indicate that both of the main concerns regarding this hire are simultaneously coming to pass. That White would create a framework that restricts Clark's innate abilities. There is also a fear that White's past relationship with Clark would generate a psychological tension in the locker room that cannot be completely resolved by professional courtesy. Seen as the